Hello and welcome back to the channel. In the previous video, we looked at control structures, and in this video, we're going to be looking at methods in more depth. As we said before, methods are blocks of code that perform a specific task. These methods can take input, and we call these inputs the parameters of the method, and they can also return a certain type of value. When a method performs a task that does not depend on the contents of any object, we declare that method as static, and we call it a static method or a class method. So the difference between a static and a non-static method is that to call a non-static method, we need to first create an object and use that object variable to call the method. But when it comes to static methods, since they do not depend on objects, there is no need to create an object, so we can simply use the name of our class to access the static method. An example of a built-in class that has static methods is the math class. To see that, we're going to create a new class, and we're going to call it math methods. And since we're going to be running the class, we're going to tick public static void main, and we're going to press on finish. Now, to use the math class, we do not need to import it. That is because it's part of the java.lang package, and as we've seen before, all the classes in the java.lang package are imported by default. In our main method, we're going to declare an integer variable called num, and we're going to give it the value 4. And what this program is going to do is it's going to print out the square of this number and the square root of this number. So we're going to have system.out.printf, and our format is going to be the square of %d is %f, followed by a new line character. So in the %d, we're going to substitute num, and in the %f, we're going to substitute the square of 4, which we can calculate using the math class. So we're going to have math dot, and the name of the method is POW, which is going to take in two inputs. The first number is going to be the base, and the second number is going to be the exponent. In our case, since we want to square the number, our exponent is going to be 2, and we're going to end our statement. So what we need to note here is that in order to use the POW method, we did not create an object. Instead, we directly used the method using the class name. So what this means is the POW method is a static method. You can also have another print statement. And this time our format is going to be the square root of %d is %f. And we're going to have our new line character. And the %d, we're going to substitute num. And to calculate the square root, again, we can use a static method inside the math class. So we're going to have math dot, and the method name is sqrt. And it's going to take in one input. One thing to note here is that both math.pow and math.squareroot return floating point numbers or decimal numbers. So when we use a printf statement for the placeholder, we're going to have to use %f. Now we can save our file and run our code. And we get the square of 4 is 16 and the square root of 4 is 2. Another concept we can look at is static attributes. Just like static methods, we can also have static attributes. To see this, we're going to create a variable of type double, and we're going to call it area. And we're going to set it equal to num times, and we're going to use a static attribute in the math class, which is math.pi. So here, since we're not creating an object to access the value of pi, this means that pi is a static attribute. So to see that this works, we're going to have a print statement. Our format is going to be the area of a circle with radius %d is %f, followed by a new line. For the %d, we're going to substitute num, and for the %f, we're going to substitute area. So if we save our file and run our code, we get the area of a circle with radius 4 is 50.26. So from what we've seen so far, we can now explain why the main method is static. Declaring main as static allows the JVM to invoke the main method without creating an instance of our class or without creating an object. Next, we're going to look at the random class, which has different methods for generating random integers, doubles, or Boolean values. To see this, we're going to create a new class, and we're going to call it roll dice. And since we're going to be running this program, we're going to tick public static void main. Now, since the random class is not part of the java.lang package, we're going to have to import it. So we're going to have import java.util.random. And to use the random class, we're going to create an object. It's going to be of type random, and we're going to call it random numbers, and we're going to set it equal to new random. Now what our program is going to do is it's going to simulate rolling a dice 6,000 times, and it's going to tell us the frequency of each number. So it's going to tell us how many times we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So to store these frequencies, we're going to have variables. The first one is going to be called frequency 1, and we're going to set it to 0. We're also going to have frequency 2, and we're going to set it to 0. Frequency 3, and we're going to set it to 0. Frequency 4, and we're going to set it to 0. Frequency 5, and we're going to set it to 0. And finally, we're going to have frequency 6, and we're going to set it to 0. Next, we're going to have a variable called face. This variable is going to store whatever number we get when we roll the dice. Now, to roll the dice 6,000 times, we need to use a loop. And since we know how many times our loop is going to run, we're going to use a for loop. And our initializing statement is going to be int roll is equals to 1. Our condition is going to be roll is less than or equals to 6,000. And our updating statement is going to be roll plus plus. So inside our for loop, we're going to generate a random number. To do that, we're going to have our random numbers object, and we're going to access the next int variable, which is going to take in a bound. In our case, we're going to give it 6. So what this is going to do is generate a number from 0 to 6 without including 6. So it's going to generate a random number from 0 to 5. But when rolling a dice, we want to generate a number from 1 till 6. So what we can do is add 1 to this statement. So what this is going to do is generate a number from 1 till 6. Finally, we can set this statement to face. And to check what number we got, we can use a switch statement. So we're going to have switch. The variable we want to compare is face. And we're going to have our different cases. So the first case is 1. So if our face is 1, we want to increase the frequency for 1. And we're going to have our break statement. Our second case is 2, and we're going to increase the frequency for 2, and we're going to have break. Then we're going to have case 3, and we're going to increase the frequency for 3. Then we're going to have break. Then we're going to have case 4, and we're going to increase the frequency for 4. Then we're going to have break. We're going to have case 5. We're going to increase the frequency for 5. We're going to have break. And finally, we're going to have case 6. And we're going to increase the frequency for 6. And we're going to have a break. Next, we're going to exit out of the for loop. And we're going to print out our different frequencies. So we're going to have system.out.println 1. And we're going to concatenate the frequency for 1. And we're going to copy this statement 6 more times. And we're going to save our file and run our code. As you can see, we get the frequency for each dice roll. So we've had 1 1,000 times, 2 also 1,000 times, we had 3 993 times, and so on. Now in this example, we wanted to generate a random integer, but if we wanted to generate a random floating value or a random Boolean value, we can use different methods. The final topic we're going to be looking at in this section is method overloading. Method overloading occurs when we have methods with the same name, but different sets of parameters or inputs. So the compiler chooses the right method based on the input we give it. For example, if we have two overloaded methods, one that takes in an int and another that takes a double, when we call this method, if we give it an int, the int method is called, and if we give it a double, the double method is called. To see this, we're going to create a new class, and we're going to call it method overload, and we won't be running this file directly, so we don't need to tick public static void main, and we're going to press on finish. So we're going to define a public method. The first method is going to have a return type of int, and it's going to be called square, and it's going to take in an integer as input. We're going to call it int num, and inside this method we're going to first print out called with int argument, and we're going to return num times num. So this is going to be our first method. And next we're going to define another public method. Its return type is going to be double. Its name is going to be the same as the previous one, so it's going to be square. And this time it's going to take in a double input. We're going to call it num. And in this method we're going to print out called with double argument. And we're going to return num times num. So this is what we mean by method overloading. One thing you need to note is that the parameter set has to be different. So what we cannot do here is have the same parameter set, but have a different return type. This is not going to work. For method overloading to work, we're going to have different set of parameters. So we're going to put this back to double, and we're going to save this file. And in order to test this, we're going to create a new class. We're going to call it method overload test. And since we're going to be running this program, we're going to tick public static void main, and we're going to click on finish. Now in the main method, we're going to create an object of type method overload, and we're going to call it mn, and we're going to set it equal to new method overload. Now we don't have to import this class because they're in the same package. And now we're going to call mn.square. And first we're going to give it an int value. Let's give it, for example, 2. And since the method has a return type, we can print it out. So we're going to have system.out.println. And we're going to have mn.square. Now if we save our file and run our code, you can see that we called the method with the int argument because it gets displayed, and we also get the square. Now instead of 2, if we had 2.2, for example, a double value, and if we save our file and run our code, this time we're calling the double method, and we're going to get a double value returned. So this is it for this section. In the next video, we're going to be looking at arrays and array lists. Thank you for watching this video, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more programming content.